Hey guys, this is a 2004 Highlander with V6 3MZ-FE engine, and I'm going to replace the valve cover gaskets and spark plug tube seals. While I have everything taken apart, I'll also be performing the following: clean intake carbon buildup, clean inner part of the throttle body, replace fuel injector or rings, clean several years of oil leak mess that's covering the entire engine, and more. Replace spark plugs. And I have to replace many wire connectors and some hoses that broke during this work. Please note that this video applies to all of the following Toyota and Lexus cars with 3MZ FE V6 engine.
So the most difficult part about this project is being able to get the valve cover out and put back in, but you got a lot of things competing here. So I'm gonna go through all the items that you have to do. You have to make room in the front here, you have to make room in the back, on the side. So let's start from here. What I did here was I disconnected all the fuel injector connectors and put that on the side, okay, and then get this freed up to get it out of the way. Because if you leave it, when you're trying to go in with the valve cover flat, this part's gonna get in the way. And by having it out here, you have good access because you wanna go in kind of flat with the valve cover. The other thing is, with this one, there's a clip there, and there's another clip there. And okay, if you push that clip in, that you can get this lifted up. You can see I lifted up almost an inch over there. So that gave you extra room. And then you see the bracket there? There's one more here that attaches there and one more that attaches there. I'm completely taking it out. I didn't have to take that one out. It's not a big deal. This is already loose. It's just connected by this 10 millimeter nut in the back. So that can be pulled out, but that's not really getting in the way too much. However, this middle one and one on the right, those will get in the way. So I see some people just leave the bottom side of the bolt still loosened but still left on there, but that'll still get in the way. You'll have to struggle with it. So the best is just get rid of it, and you're not really saving much time. Just take out this bolt and you can put it back in. Okay, and then even with that, so this side is pretty clear. You can go in pretty good. This side, if you look here, I notice some cars don't have this extra heat shield tape here, and you can see how this thing spins around, and on that side as well. This will also get in the way, okay? Because this tape, this bracket here is inside this tape. So what I had to do was cut maybe about a ½ inch of tape so I can get it to spin up like this. Otherwise, the maximum it will go is like this, and then the valve cover will catch it. So by cutting ½ inch here, I'm able to get that to spin up so that it's completely out of the way. Even with that, this is the edge where, because of the height of these camshaft gears, they're kind of tall, so you have to go up kind of high, right? You have to clear this, go through, and then you have to come down. So it's still gonna be a little tight, but you can kind of stretch it up. You can try to zip tie this up or have somebody kind of pull on it, but I was able to do it mostly by myself. Once I get valve cover up to here, I'm able to just pull this up a little bit and get it clear. And so you got to do that while you got to be applying the some silicone RTVs right on the edge over there and along this edge here. So you got to do that without disturbing the silicone that you applied, and you have to make sure the gasket that you put onto the valve cover, it's not coming out of its place. Okay, so it is pretty tricky. This is the oxygen sensor connector. I disconnected that because otherwise this thing here is too short and it'll keep it from lifting up high. Okay, so I'll have more details of some of the steps in detail videos. One other thing, this is the evap line. The hose broke, so I just bought a replacement. All the ignition coil connectors broke. Mass airflow sensor connector broke. There was one other connector, I forget here, probably underneath the towel, that broke.
For basic disassembly, I'm just gonna zip right through them so that I can
Yep.
provide more close-up views and detailed
Yep.
instructions on tricky areas. First, remove the engine cover. Next, undo clips on the air filter housing and release the mass airflow sensor wire on the side of the air filter housing. Next, disconnect the airflow sensor cable, and you can leave the mass airflow sensor intact. In my case, I took it out to clean it, and I have a separate video on how to clean the mass airflow sensor and the throttle body. Next, loosen the clamps on both sides of the air intake hose. Disconnect the hose. Label different hose locations on the air filter housing so that you can install them back correctly. Disconnect all the hoses. Now, disconnect the side air hose to completely detach the air intake tube. This job requires disconnecting the upper radiator hose and coolant hose that connects to the throttle body.
Yep.
The problem in this car is if you don't pre-drain the
Yep.
coolant, you're gonna lose almost a gallon of coolant onto your engine and to the work floor. This car's coolant was just recently flushed, so I don't want to waste another $30 for a gallon of pre-mixed OEM coolant. So I'm just going to cleanly collect it and reuse it. Here's what I did to cleanly collect the coolant. First, I ran the clear plastic hose through the small hole in the splash shield under the front bumper, and then connected the top end to the coolant drain outlet. This is the hose size that I used. Note that quarter-inch inside diameter was slightly too tight, but by heating the end with a cigarette lighter to make it flexible, made it stretch a bit and fit tightly onto the drain outlet. Second, I placed a clean plastic container under the hose to catch the coolant. Lastly, I opened the shutoff valve to drain the coolant. The drain shutoff valve is located near the bottom of the radiator on the driver's side, and you can reach it from the top without having to remove the undershield. Now, be careful not to unscrew the shutoff valve too much because it'll come out completely and the coolant will drain out through that hole. So just open it partially and have it drain through the bottom outlet hose. Draining about gallon of coolant should be sufficient.
This coil connector is broke, the locking tab. And I have a separate video on how to just replace the connector tab. That one just broke right there. It doesn't take much for these things to break. This is gonna break, I'm sure. Yep, that one just broke. So, just gonna loosen it. The spark plug socket's gonna be 5/8 deep socket. Wow, a lot of buildup here. Definitely it's due for replacement. It's got 215k miles. This is the original spark plug. And this is NGK Iridium IFR6A11. Here's what it looks like.
Remove two bolts on each side to take this strut bar out. The previous owner replaced the struts at different times, so the bolt sizes were different. I already have too many bolts to keep track of, so for these, I'm just gonna put them back for right now. I think you can leave some of these hoses attached, but I'm going to clean the backside of the throttle body, so I'll disconnect 4 hoses attached to the throttle body. During this work, I noticed that some of the hoses were really brittle and they wouldn't come off. Spraying some WD-40 made some of them come off, but not all. As you'll see later, I literally broke one hose by pulling on it too hard. Haha. Disconnect the throttle body connector. Note that the locking tab for this also broke. Now remove 4 10mm bolts to remove the throttle body. That one hose that's dangling there is because it wouldn't come off, so I took it off the other end. I tried to look up this part name, but I can't find it. In any case, this thing sits between the throttle body and the intake manifold. First, remove 5 12mm bolts on the front, and then remove one 12mm bolt on the metal bracket. This is kind of hidden in the back, but if you look all the way back to the firewall side, you'll be able to see it. For this project, having a ratchet type wrench is really going to help to remove bolts in extremely tight spaces like this. So I started without the ratchet wrench, but ended up buying this 7-piece set from Harbor Freight for about 20 bucks when it was on sale. Look how dirty that is. That's why I'm removing everything so that I can clean it. Now pull this part out, and there you can see the last 12 millimeter bolt that came off the bracket in the back. This evap hose was hard as a rock and wouldn't come off even after spraying some WD-40, so I ended up breaking it and had to buy the replacement hose. This hose was under so tight that I had to actually cut it out. Next, disconnect this evap solenoid hose and put it to the passenger side. Next, remove two 10 millimeter nuts on the evap bracket and flip the bracket over to the top of the front valve cover. Also, be sure to always cover the camshaft area because if you drop a bolt or a nut, it can drop into the valve spring compartment below, and this already big job will turn into a much bigger job. Next, we're going to remove the intake manifold. First, remove two 14 millimeter nuts on the outer ends of the intake manifold, and then remove four 8 millimeter hex bolts in the center. Next, remove 10 millimeter nut that's holding a ground wire. After that, you can remove the thin metal bracket out of the way. Next, remove a 14 millimeter bolt that is hidden behind the intake manifold. This is a pretty tight space, and this is where a ratchet type wrench will really come handy. Note that removal is already a bit tricky, but I had a really terrible time to install this bolt back later because you can't visually see the hole on the intake manifold side to line up the bolt. I probably struggled at least 30 minutes just to get this bolt installed back. Wait, we're not done. There's one more 12 millimeter bolt hidden behind the intake manifold. You can only see this bolt if you go under the car, but I'll drop a camera in there so that you guys can see this bolt. Since you can't see it, you'll have to remove it by the feel of your fingertips. Again, ratchet wrench is going to work best for this bolt. Also note that this bolt also gave me some trouble to put back in later. Now we just have to disconnect one vacuum hose on the top of the intake manifold, and then we can remove the intake manifold. Because of the two metal brackets where we just removed two bolts from are pressing up on the intake manifold on the back side, you'll have to wiggle intake manifold while lifting it up to be able to remove it. If you loosen the bottom side bolts for those two brackets, then intake manifold will come out more easily. Let's have a quick peek at the intake valves. Oh my goodness, that's a pretty heavy carbon buildup on the walls. But looking closely, looks like the valves are doing better. That's because the fuel is actually sprayed to the intake valves for this type of engine, which keeps the valves somewhat clean. Unlike a GDI engine car like on my Lexus GS330, where there was a very thick carbon buildup on intake valves that I had to clean. In any case, I'm going to clean this carbon buildup on intake a little later. But for now, let's go back to three brackets in the back that we had some trouble to remove the bolts from.
This right here was 14. You see, you got very little room back here. This and this was 12. You can see there's very little room back there as well. So let's take a look at where all the bolts are. There's one there, 2, 3, 4. And of course, it's hard to see the ones in the back. Yeah, even with the camera, it's hard to go back in there.
There are five more bolts on the back side. Use a flathead screwdriver to push up on two plastic retainers to the fuel injector wiring harness.
Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 10 millimeter bolts. And that one there is 12 millimeter.
Don't forget the black spacers under the 10 millimeter bolts. Disconnect three coil connectors on the bank one, and as expected, all three locking tabs broke. Next, remove three 10 millimeter bolts on ignition coils and pull out the ignition coils. And then take out the spark plugs using 5/8" deep socket. The back spark plugs look worse than the front ones.
Alright, next I'm gonna remove 3 10mm nuts. 1, 2, 3. I don't want to drop these small nuts. They're like that.
Now pull out the plastic brackets out of the long screw.
I'm gonna put the small nuts back in because I got way too many nuts and bolts to keep track of, and this will also prevent this bracket from going back in there. I'm gonna actually try to clean up some of this mess here so that they don't fall into the camshaft area. I'm gonna plug up the PCV valve and the spark plug holes just so that I don't get any junk in there. I'm gonna have to loosen the bolts that's holding up these brackets from under the car to create more room to push this thick wire harness back. Okay, so I'm under the car, I'm looking up. I need to loosen that bolt right there. That's for this bracket. Then I need to loosen that bolt for that bracket. I can't find the other one. It's right where my finger is, right there. Let me see if I can get camera up there. It's that one. And you can see we have access to some of the lower side of the valve cover bolts. Actually, that one is a little bit red.
This could be a little bit of transmission fluid. While at the bottom of the car, the left two bracket bolts can be accessed using a 12mm ratchet wrench, but the right bracket will require using a 14mm socket wrench. Also, initially, I just loosened the bottom side of 3 bracket bolts, but that didn't create enough room to move the thick wire out of the way. So I ended up just completely taking out all 3 bottom bolts a little later.
Wow, I don't feel any tension. I mean, this is so loose. Wow. Oh my gosh. It's almost as if I already loosened. None of these are tight. Oh my gosh. I wonder what the heck happened.
So here's what's going on with this.
This is the old gasket. Look at how rigid this is. I can hold it like a stick. And this is the new gasket. And of course, it's very flexible. Let's measure the depth of the old one. This is about 6.7 millimeter. Let's take a look at the new one. It's about 9 millimeter. You see the depth here? The new gasket's gonna go in much deeper and seal it. Whereas the old gasket, it's all dried up. So it's shorter now, so it's not able to seal the oil leak.
Removing valve cover bolts aren't too bad at all. I was able to remove 5 bolts on the front easily. Also, 3 bolts on the back were not too difficult to remove from the top of the engine, but the leftmost back bolt had difficult access from the top, so I had to go under the car for that one. For the bolt on the passenger side corner, I had to access it from the bottom of the car.
I couldn't get a socket to go, so I used this ratchet type of wrench, 10 millimeter, and I got it to turn a couple times, so it's loosened. And I'm gonna reach up in there and loosen it rest of the way by hand. Wow, I'm concerned how I'm gonna put all these back. Oh my god. Okay.
Technically, I have all the necessary bolts removed, but the valve cover is no way near ready to come out. It's due to the thick wiring harness, three metal brackets, fuel injector rail, and other parts getting in the way.
So this is the oxygen sensor connector. Basically, you press down here and then pull it out. This will get you, I don't know, maybe another ½ inch of, oh no, quite a bit more. It'll give you more uplift. See guys, the whole problem is this wire, the thick one, that has to move more before the valve cover can come out, but it's really held down here. So what I did was, you see that tab right there? I took it and then pushed it this way. Okay, just slightly. Don't go too hard and break it. And then you lift up, and then I felt it pop up, and it popped out about almost an inch. And then same thing here. As you can see before, this was not moving at all, but now it's flexible. So that should give us another inch or so room.
Now the rightmost bracket on the wiring harness is preventing the valve cover to lift up. Using zip ties to lift up on the thick wiring harness helped to create just a little bit more space. I think it's important for you to see the exact struggle to remove the valve cover as is without the video being edited or sped up to clearly understand this challenge.
Oh my gosh. Okay, now this fuel injector, fuel line is in the way. Oh my God. Oh.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Toyota. Getting the valve cover out was a big battle, but getting the valve cover back in has its own challenges. I even broke a valve cover bolt on a hard to reach location, and broken piece was stuck inside of the engine block. Yikes! I panicked momentarily that I might have just lost an engine. So in the next video, I'll cover all the cleaning and reinstallation steps I've taken and additional rabbits I had to pull out of the hat to get the valve cover back in. I had over 200 video clips and it took a week to put this video together. So I hope it helped, and it certainly helps me if you can like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with the reinstallation video.